we need to be salt and light into the world, being influencers, making ourselves vulnerable, opening wide our hearts, but not opening wide our hearts to the influences of the world.
Hey, Scott, I'm going to read you a definition from Merriam-Webster.
All right.
And you tell me what's being defined.
All right.
Are you ready?
I'll give it a go.
The practice of maintaining a greater than usual physical distance from other people, or of avoiding contact with people or objects in public places during the outbreak of a contagious disease to minimize exposure and reduce the transmission of infection.
I'm going to guess that's social distancing.
That is social distancing. Oh, the good old days, huh? Of social distancing. That is the president of the Dr. Fauci Fan Club and senior pastor of East White Oak Bible Church, Scott Burkle. My name is Treg Whitaker, and you have joined us for the Ask Scott podcast. Sunday, you were preaching from chapter 6, the end of chapter 6, beginning of chapter 7, 2 Corinthians.
Yes.
And one of Paul's larger points in this section of scriptures is about the Corinthians distancing themselves from non-Christians. So what you had to say sparked a few questions. Shall we dive in?
Let's go for it.
All right. In verse 11 of chapter 6, 2 Corinthians, Paul describes himself as having spoken freely to the Corinthians. There's a very famous quote that goes something like, preach the gospel and use words if necessary, something like that.
Sure.
I wonder if Paul would ascribe to that evangelistic philosophy.
Yeah. Well, we know he didn't, because in Romans chapter 10, he says faith comes through hearing, and hearing through the word of Christ. And so it's important for us to recognize that words are necessary. It does not mean that there isn't some truth in the saying that you quoted, because our life needs to back that up. And Paul actually is talking about that in this very text.
If you appreciate the Ask Scott podcast, if you find it interesting or helpful at all, it would be an encouragement to us if you would click the like and subscribe buttons. Yeah, just like that. Verse 11, what does it mean to have a wide open heart towards someone? Paul is suggesting that his heart is open toward the Corinthians, and that the Corinthians must not have an open heart. He's encouraging them to open their hearts. What does that mean? Is it a vulnerability? Do I need to be vulnerable to you to have my heart open to you?
Yeah, I think Paul is using differing language in order to help us understand what Christian love really is. And there's a wonderful quote from C.S. Lewis' book, The Four Loves, where he says, to love at all is to be vulnerable. Love anything and your heart will be wrung and possibly broken. If you want to make sure of keeping it intact, you must give it to no one, not even an animal. Wrap it carefully round with hobbies and little luxuries. Avoid all entanglements. Lock it up safe in the casket or coffin of your selfishness. Isn't that a good turn of phrase? But in that casket, safe, dark, motionless, airless, it will change. It will not be broken. It will become unbreakable, impenetrable, irredeemable. And I think that Lewis is onto something there that Paul is trying to help the Corinthians to overcome. There's a tendency, at least among some believers, to hey, we got to watch out and protect ourselves and not be vulnerable. And what Paul is suggesting is that to be a Christian is to expose ourselves to that kind of vulnerability. What Lewis is making the point is that the bad things are gonna happen either way, and what you want are all the good things that happen from being vulnerable and being willing to take the risks of the bad things. Otherwise, you run the risk of all the horrible things of isolation.
Yeah. In verse 14, the idea that the Corinthians could be unequally yoked is what Paul was encouraging. Don't be unequally yoked.
Yeah.
Well, the idea that they could be unequally yoked suggests that they are Christians. The target audience here is a group of believers, not to be unequally yoked with unbelievers. But just a couple of chapters before, Paul is begging them, be reconciled to God.
Yeah.
And that sounds like something that you would say to an unbeliever.
Yeah.
So what's happening here?
So let me answer it two ways. One is that at Corinth, in the Corinthian church, there were both believers and non-believers, as evidenced by what we see throughout the book. There are people in the church that are not believers. So Paul's doing that, imploring, hey, everybody there in the church, be reconciled to God if you're not. It's why, for example, one of the things that I do almost every Sunday, I wouldn't say that it's without exception, but almost every Sunday, is I give a call for people to come to know Christ. Does that mean that I think that everybody in the church is coming doesn't know Jesus? No, but I know that there's probably some who aren't, so we want to give that call. The second thing is that if you look at that text in 2 Corinthians 5, you'll see that Paul is making an admonishment to the believers. Hey, we are ambassadors for Christ, and what our call is to implore others, whether they are inside the church, whether they are professed believers or not, we are imploring them to be reconciled to God through Jesus Christ.
Yeah. And let's stick with the unequally yoked theme.
Yeah.
What Paul suggests here is that the Corinthians shouldn't be unequally yoked. And it's a call for separation, really. Mm-hmm. And it made me think a little bit of a section in our church's constitution.
Yeah.
So we're going to get into the weeds a little bit here.
Let's dive
some
in.
East White Oak weeds.
Yeah.
I just want to read a section for you from the church's constitution, the heading of which is separation. Okay? Mm-hmm. We believe that all the saved should live in such a manner as not to bring reproach on their Savior and Lord, that separation is commanded by God from those who, quote, abide not in the doctrine of Christ. Mm-hmm. That's just a small part of a larger section entitled Separation. Now, help me reconcile what this seems to be a call to separate from unbelievers with the example that Jesus gave in his own ministry of engagement with tax collectors and sinners and prostitutes and drunkards.
Yeah.
What's happening there?
Yeah. The question that you want to answer is, who is influencing whom? And so Paul says here at the very beginning of our text, open your hearts. Come on, be vulnerable. And then just a couple of sentences later, he's saying, watch out, separate from the world. Well, what is that? It's a both and thing. We need to be salt and light into the world, being influencers, making ourselves vulnerable, opening wide our hearts, but not opening wide our hearts to the influences of the world, of the flesh, of the devil, not opening ourselves up to becoming like the world. And so that section in our Constitution is just warning those who would desire to be members of our church to not become worldly in the sense of joining in with the world's sins, but rather we are to go out and make an impact for Christ.
Let's try and make a real practical application of this call for separation.
Sure.
Let's say that someone comes to Christ and they are in a marriage.
Yeah.
Or they are in a business partnership.
Yeah.
Or they have friendships.
Sure.
With people who are not saved.
Yeah.
I mean, un-Christian, ungodly people. Is this call to separation one that would require a Christian to do away with that business partnership, do away with that marriage, and do away with those friendships?
Yeah. Paul addresses that kind of question directly in his in 1 Corinthians, where he says, if your marriage partner is willing to live with you and they are not a Christian and you are, you should maintain that relationship. So I think that might be a good paradigm for us to think about is that we should not unnecessarily disentangle ourselves from relationships, but we also ought to, again, not be influenced in a worldly fashion toward them. One thing that happens is that there's almost a self-segregating thing that happens when a person becomes a believer. So let's say I got a bunch of buddies and we all go out drinking together, and we have a great time doing very worldly and ungodly things. And then I become a Christian. well, I want to keep those friendships. So I do, but I don't join in the reindeer games that they do any longer because my mind and my heart, my affections have changed. That's going to have the effect of not having the same connection. If those friends do not want to move toward me, it doesn't mean I stay with them doing all the things they do, and it doesn't mean that I quit loving them or even quit having a relationship with them. But it does necessarily mean that there's going to be a shift in how the relationship goes.
Yeah. Of course, the passage that you preached from on Sunday is from a larger letter, right?
Yeah.
So the broader context, I'm going to go back a couple of chapters.
Okay.
So back to chapter 5, it's clear that Paul is instructing the Corinthians that God reconciles. God reconciles us to himself. And we become the righteousness of God through something that God does through Jesus. That's chapter 5.
That's right.
Now we get to chapter 7, verse 1, and Paul says, cleanse yourself and bring holiness to completion by this self-cleansing that you're doing.
Yeah.
So the question is, clear up God's role in our pursuit of holiness and our role in our pursuit of holiness.
Yeah. This is a fascinating thing, and I think we should be excited about it rather than troubled. Okay, so there's sometimes where we ask a question like that, and it just feels like we should get a, complete, clear, no issue answer that is untroubling. But what I would want to suggest is that first we need to think about the difference between justification and sanctification. God is the one who justifies, but God has called us to work out our own salvation. Yet at the same time, when he calls us to work out our own salvation, he goes on to say, for it is God who is at work within you to sanctify you. So there's that aspect of it. The other thing that I would say is that the Bible, particularly, well, it's true in the Old Testament as well as the New, that there is a call for God's people to be holy. And to do something that advances their holiness. Let me just give you a few passages. Leviticus 11:44. So this is people of Israel, right? For I am the Lord your God. Consecrate yourselves, therefore, and be holy, for I am holy. So there's something that God is calling his people to do. Doesn't mean that they're saving themselves. It's not about justification. It is, however, about something that does involve our self-discipline and our energy, right? The New Testament. But as he who called you is holy, be holy in all your conduct, since it is written, you shall be holy, for I am holy. 1 Peter 1. Or how about Hebrews 12:14. Strive for peace with everyone and for the holiness without which no one will see the Lord. So there's a striving for holiness. That's something that's New Testament as well. Now, having understood that this is all something that we need to have some energy and striving toward, let's back up a little bit and say, where does that all come from? Well, before the creation of the world, Ephesians 1:4 says, he chose us in him before the foundation of the world that we should be holy and blameless before him. So the whole purpose of election is that we would be holy. It's a fascinating thing that God was up to something. Yeah, we're right here in the moment striving, but God was up to something before the creation of the world on our behalf. That's so exciting and mind-blowing to me.
Yeah.
And then Jesus prayed in his high priestly prayer in John 17, sanctify them through the truth. Your word is truth. So this idea that God uses his word in answer to the prayer of God the Son to God the Father on our behalf, and then our striving is a part of that plan. This is just so, rather than troubling, this excites me. Because what it does is it tells me that every move I make toward the Lord is something that He has been superintending all along, and I can look back and I go, wow, that God even gave me the hunger, the want to. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. That's a joy.
Thank you, Scott. That'll do it for this episode of the Ask Scott podcast. You can find previous episodes on our YouTube channel. Just search at East White Oak. You can follow East White Oak Bible Church on Facebook and Instagram. We look forward to you joining us the next time Pastor Scott answers your questions about the Bible on the Ask Scott podcast.